Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. And depending on wherever you live, welcome to tonight's middle of the night or early morning bonus upload. Before we get into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's middle of the night / early morning bonus upload, shall we?
Today's first Dogman encounter. I know two guys who had seen a Dogman. Both are very honest fellows, and I've known them for a long time, and I wouldn't take it serious if it wasn't these guys. They told me about their experiences just about a year before everyone had cheap internet, so they weren't repeating stuff read off the internet. They used the term monkey dog, though, instead of Dogman. One was hunting at night, and he saw a pair of them running through a field, grab the top of a fence, and flip over it in one fluid stride. He said that before they got to the fence, they stopped and turned to look at him in unison before moving on. He said he was in pretty good cover and don't know how they knew he was there. The second one was driving his truck along a backcountry road when a Dogman ran in front of him. He had 2 other people in the cab with him and 3 in the bed of the truck. They all saw it. This was right outside of Point Pleasant, where the Mothman had been active 30 years prior. Today's second Dogman encounter is a subscriber Dogman encounter. Hello, Jeffrey. This is my encounter. My encounter happened in Churchill County, which is a rural farming, ranching county in northern Nevada, about 60 miles east of Reno. It was late October 2010. I was 19 at the time. I was with my girlfriend, and we were driving out to the desert for some private time. You know, typical teenage activities, aside from the fact that neither of us drank or did drugs. It was 9 at night or so, and it was fairly dark. I was driving my first car, which was a 97 Geo Metro. If you don't know what these are, they are a small economy car, 2-doored and pretty low to the ground. We were driving along Casey Road, which runs parallel along a very large canal. The canal is about 15 feet across and very deep. It's one of the main canals that brings water into the county for irrigation. Along the canal, there's large sagebrush and other foliage growing. Anyways, Casey Road turns into a dirt road, and if you follow it all the way down, there's a spillway called 26-Foot Drop. Our plan was to head to the spillway and hang out there for a bit. So we're driving along, and it's pretty dark outside. My lights are just picking up what's in front of the car, when my girlfriend and I both see something ahead of us. Neither of us say anything, but I'm coming upon it. It was a very large black animal, and I immediately think cow, as I've almost hit 2 cows in my car months prior. And in a lot of rural areas in Nevada, the cows are free range, so you have to be careful not to hit them. Anyway, this creature is about the size of a smaller cow, so as we're getting closer and start rolling upon this thing, we start getting better detail. This creature was on the passenger side of the vehicle. The front half of the animal was in the bushes facing the back of the canal. So all we see is the rear end of this animal sticking out of the sagebrush, Well, its front half is obstructed. I remember my lights hitting it and seeing the fur. It was dark black, it was shaggy, and I could tell the fur had length to it. My lights kind of gleamed on the fur. I remember it being unusually dark in color, and it was darker than the night around us. While looking at the fur, I saw that it had a black bushy tail, so now I'm thinking dog. But as the car is getting closer and closer to this thing, its true size dawns on me. At this same moment, my girlfriend starts leaning herself into the driver's side of the car to put some distance between herself and the passenger window. As my car rolls up next to this creature, neither of us are saying anything as we're both kind of stupefied and shocked, but she's clearly scared as she's trying to lean into my seat. The car is inching closer to the creature, and I see typical dog legs, a dog tail, the whole rear end of a dog, but bigger and thicker than a normal dog. My car eventually lines up with the animal's hindquarters, and I can see the rear end of this creature is above my passenger mirror. Now, Jeffrey, the rear end of this creature was big. I know my car was low to the ground, but this animal was between 3 and 4 feet at the hip. At that point, my girlfriend is practically in my seat, and I hit the gas. Neither of us saw the front of the creature, but what we saw was enough to scare us. Needless to say, we didn't end up staying on that road, and we immediately left. Recently, I got in contact with her again and asked her if she remembered anything about that night. This was her response. I remember only seeing the back end of it and grabbing your arm while my heart stopped. It was so dark, I don't remember seeing anything in the mirror or even when we backed up. It was just gone. It comes back to me every once in a while, and I think that was the first time I had ever been afraid like that. All I remember is we were talking, and all of a sudden I looked to my left and saw this big black thing. In between the tall grass going into the canal, it was fucking huge with a large tail. I remember also you didn't want to back up. I know that whatever it was had to have been pretty scary to shake her up like this. She was a tough girl, about 5'10". She was taking boxing classes while we were together, and she also lived a pretty rough life, with part of her early years being spent homeless on the streets in Vegas. So I know it had to be pretty scary for her to remember this creature all those years after. In more recent years, I became close friends with 2 Native Americans from local tribe. They both had separate stories of their family members encountering what they call skinwalker on tribal lands, south of Churchill County. They both have only given me vague overviews of their encounters, but I would like to one day get them to share their full story with you. Today's third encounter is from a subscriber. Now, this subscriber had sent me their encounter a couple of weeks ago, and it was 4 encounters they had happened to them with a dogman. Unfortunately, their 4th encounter, the email had decided to cut it off. So I shared with you the first 3 and a little bit of their 4th. So instead of having you guys go back and listen to the first 3 and then catch up to the 4th, I'm just going to share the entire encounter again with you guys. Hey Jeff, how are you and your family doing? I hope you guys are doing well. Love listening to your Dogman stories. I have a few encounters of my own. Haven't told anyone but my kids these stories. Well, a year ago I had a stroke, so I wanted to question the people that happened to be around when I saw the Dogman, just to make sure I was remembering correctly. My first encounter happened when I was 7 or 8. My dad, uncle, brother, 2 cousins, and myself went fishing off the bay. We lived in Saginaw, Michigan then. When we were done fishing, we went back to my uncle's house. He had a shed out back that he cleaned the fish in, so while Dad and my uncle cleaned the fish, me and the boys played hide-and-seek in the backyard. I was hiding behind the shed, which was next to the railroad tracks in the woods. While my dad and uncle cleaned the fish, they would throw the guts into the woods. I heard something big moving around the other side of the shed. Thinking that it was my dad or uncle, I just stayed where I was. But did look over the area and saw this big wolf-faced creature with blue eyes. Its fur was black and gray. From that point, I don't remember much more. I guess I passed out and peed myself. Next thing I remember was everyone standing over me, my dad picking me up and taking me inside to my aunt, who was an EMT. She told him she thought I was in shock. Her and my mom helped clean me up and we went back home. For the next few days, I remember sleeping in my parents' room, keep having nightmares of big wolf trying to kill me. My second encounter, I was 14, and my friend and I went for a walk to the store for breadsticks and pop. This was in the 80s, when kids weren't watched as closely as they are now, so going for a 2-mile walk wasn't unheard of at that age. The sky was very weird looking. We found out later it was caused by the northern lights. We lived in Zilwaukee, Michigan, then. Everything was okay till the way back from the store, when we saw this big creature in the middle of the road where its back legs were in the middle of the ongoing lane and its front legs were in the middle of the oncoming lane. So it was about 8 feet long. All you could see was its outline and the green glowing eyes. We then slowly turned around and walked back to the store and called my dad to pick us up. We told him it's back. Knowing my going nightmares of this big wolf, he came to get us. We saw nothing on the way home. My third encounter, I was 18, living in Lake Michigan, driving to Beavertown, Michigan, to work. I was alone this time, driving down the back roads, going about 80 miles an hour. From my right side, I saw a deer coming out of the woods, running fast in front of my car. I slowed down, but still hit it. But there was a Dogman chasing it. This one looked different from the other ones I had seen. It looked like a lion head with red eyes. It continued running into the other side of the road and into the woods. I then noticed headlights coming up from behind me, and I pulled off to the side of the road. I was going to let it pass me by, but the truck pulled up alongside of me and rolled down the window. 2 men were in the truck. They asked me if I was okay. I said, "Yes. Did you see it?" They said they saw me hit the first deer. The guy in the passenger side got out and looked at my car. He said I split the deer in half, messed up my radiator. The grill was gone. The headlight was pointed up to the trees. He asked me to get out and looked at the car. I quickly said no, that something was chasing the deer, and it's still out there. He poured a little water into my radiator and told me to follow them to make sure I'd get home and my car didn't break down, which I did. I made it home safely. My fourth encounter. This is the one of them stories you don't like, because you didn't see it this time, just felt uneasy and heard a howl. My best friend and I were going up to his cabin in Rogers City, Michigan. He took a wrong turn. I immediately felt uneasy and told him to get us out of here. It was a dead-end road, woods all around. Then we heard a howl, long and like nothing we had ever heard before. I now live with him and have an uneasy feeling every night when I go outside on the back porch. It's an old farmhouse surrounded by cornfields.
All right, a brief intermission, and I just feel like this needs to be shared. So, as of late, I have debunked some photos, some videos, and I do it because I'm in this field for the truth. Now, I do know that there are people that just want to hear stories, scary stories and what. And there are channels out there that will, use a ghostwriter or creepypasta. There's a ton of creepypastas about park rangers and, Bigfoot Dogman, unfortunately. Now, in my research, there is very limited park rangers coming out because they are afraid to lose their job, and the ones that have retired are afraid to lose their pensions. Great stories for entertainment, I guess. But, when these stories share conflicting information with the truth, like Tim Baker, he has dedicated his entire life to this subject. He knows park rangers that have been, have retired, that are still in service, that will not open their mouths because of the fact that they know that they'll lose their job, they'll lose their pension, they'll possibly lose their lives. Just remember that, unfortunately, because the story may be great, it may sound amazing, that it's not real. A lot of them aren't real. There are a lot of great researchers out there. Dark Waters. I'm not a great researcher. I'm a researcher. Steve from How to Hunt. I really am. David Politis. I myself don't know the man. I'm really not a great fan of him, but he's a real good researcher. Because he wants the truth. And unfortunately, those channels out there that just put the garbage out, the creepypasta, the fan fiction, the this, the that, really hurts the work that we all do. It conflicts information with truth. So just remember that. If you're here for the information, remember that. If you're here for the entertainment, that's awesome too. But, all right, I don't know. Anyway, let's move along, guys, and get into some more encounters.
Today's first possible Dogman encounter. To give some background as to how this story came up, my family and I were talking about supernatural occurrences and strange creatures that they had encountered. We are a Christian family, but take this story to be the truth. This is a second-hand experience that my grandma shared with my mom many years ago. This happened when he was an 8-year-old child in Mexico, roughly 60 years ago. My grandpa grew up in the hillsides in Mexico in the 60s. It was very rural during that time, and he lived on a large property with a few neighbors. His family didn't have much money, so he would tend to his neighbors' cattle, who owned the property further up the hillside, to earn a few pesos. His neighbor would usually accompany him in rounding up the cattle nearing sunset to bring them back to the barn. One day, though, my grandpa said his neighbor got sick and stayed inside instead of accompanying him. This wasn't too out of the ordinary, as he'd been doing this for a while and was trusted. Nearing sunset, he started herding the cattle and walking them back to the stables. When he did a count, he noticed that one of the cows was missing. Going back to look for it, he headed down the hill when he said he heard some rustling and snapping in the dry cornfields. Thinking that the cow had somehow gotten lost in the field, he called out to it. Emerging from the cornfields was what he described as a large black dog, and says he was overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread. He immediately turned to run up the hill and started screaming at the top of his lungs. He said he turned around to look behind him, and the dog had started running bipedally after him. His neighbor had heard him screaming and immediately opened the door to let him in. I'm not too sure what happened after that, except that he told his neighbor and his family what had happened, and his parents no longer let him go back up there to tend the cattle. A detail that stood out, according to my mom's retelling, was how vivid he saw this dog start to run bipedally after him. After she finished telling the story, she told me she couldn't remember the name for this folkloric creature. The shape-shifting details stood out to me, so I showed a picture of the Dogman and a skinwalker, and she pointed out the details described by my grandpa were closer to a skinwalker. My dad then remembered the name, and he said they called them Nawals in Mexico. Looking them up, I saw a striking crossover between native and Mexican folklore. Between these creatures, they are shape-shifting shamans that transform into animals, most often large dogs. Additionally, what is striking is that they don't see these creatures as something mythical or outlandish, but take them to be the truth and are supposedly well known about in the area. Other strange things have happened on his property, but I don't know all of the details yet. Today's second encounter is a possible hellhound or dogman encounter. The occurrences I'm about to explain happened in the suburb of central Ohio. This has been happening within the last 2 years, and I know I'm not crazy because others have seen them. The first sighting, driving home from a friend's house around 3 in the morning. We both see a large dog in the median, not highway, and go, "Oh shit, a dog." We turn the car around to see if it might need some help, but it vanished completely. Next sighting, most traumatizing and prominent in my memory. Best friend and I, at the time, are at my dad's house. We are walking onto the golf course that the house is on the edge of to smoke a joint. I see several large black figures in the distance, maybe 5 to 7 of them. I just wrote it off as I was stoned and tired and my vision was playing tricks on me. That is, until they moved. They all got closer to us and one lets out the worst screech I've ever heard. It was like a guttural screech hiss. I know I will never erase this memory. We both look at each other like we are about to die and bolt towards my dad's house. I tripped in the grass, and I swear I thought I was going to die at that moment. They were like the size of wolves, but pitch black. No animal native to Ohio is like that. The third sighting, I'm driving home late, probably midnight-ish, and I see a huge, distinguished wolf-like creature in the medium of this empty road, ragged, staring at me, pitch black, long fur. It looked like it was feasting on something. It just left such an awful feeling in my body the second I recognized it. The last sighting is what really validates these sightings. I was at my house with a friend, waiting for another friend to come. The friend calls my other friend and tells her about something he had just saw on the side of the road. I didn't even hear the whole conversation, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. Nick is a friend who never told me about his experiences, as we hadn't seen each other in a while. He gets to my house and describes exactly what he had seen several times. Huge, feral, pitch-black dog, the size of a wolf, matted, gross, unnatural. He said seeing it sent shivers down his whole body and just felt unsettled. I told him everything that I had seen previously, and he was freaked out as well. I never believed in anything otherworldly, but having so many experiences is freaking me out. I don't like it at all. I did some research, and the only thing that I could find in this part of the area could have built on burial grounds. Does anyone have any insight or similar experiences? I know this sounds insane, and I can barely believe it happened to me as well. That shriek I will never forget. Today's third unsettling encounter. I just got home from a road trip and I've been thinking about something I saw and can't make sense of it. Maybe some of you had seen something like this. My wife and I were driving on Highway 97 near Mount Shasta, California. It was about midnight and we were driving through a heavily wooded area without any street lamps. We rounded a corner when I saw something fast and low to the ground dart across the street about 50 to 60 yards ahead of us. I saw glowing animal eyes and the body of the shape of a big dog. We saw animals the whole road trip, and like usual, I asked my wife if she saw it to confirm. The body wasn't 100% clear because our headlights hadn't reached the section of road yet. When we got to the exact point in the road where the animal crossed, we looked to the side to see if there was anything there. There was a man dressed in army fatigues walking down the road. He didn't look at us, he just kept walking. It was pitch black, and He didn't have any type of light with him. He was only lit up by our headlights. We both got full body chills when we saw him because we were expecting to see an animal. I know that area has a magical, mystical history with a lot of unexplained sightings. This is unlike anything I've ever experienced before, and we are totally creeped out. Still can't make heads or tails of it. Today's fourth encounter is a possible Bigfoot encounter. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, completely rural. I lived in a valley community. My house was surrounded by forests and mountains. When I was 14, my dad started to hear strange sounds coming from the hills behind our house, knocking sounds as if something was hitting a tree, and an occasional inhuman yell. My dog, a rough and tough outside boy, was very drawn to those hills at random times. His ears would shoot up and he would quickly run to the forest and stay there for a while. Him going up into the hills wasn't uncommon, but at the time he started acting particularly suspicious about them. And don't worry, nothing bad happens to him in this story. Anyway, the noise started to become more frequent. My brother and his friends used to hunt for ginseng up in those hills, and they heard the noises as well. Except much louder because they were more near the source. One day the noises wouldn't stop. They progressed louder and louder, and there was growling. My brother was pretty much sick of it by now and wanted to know what the hell was going on. So he was wondering this for years. It's evening time, about to get dark, so he takes a flashlight and a shotgun and heads up into the hills. He sees a creature that looked like what he said could be a Sasquatch. It was tall, broad shoulders, wider than its torso. He more so saw its silhouette because of the darkness that came. He chased it off, came back to the house, told me what happened, and drew a sketch of what it looked like. The noises had stopped after that day. They never came back. A couple of weeks later, a new Bigfoot special came on TV. A witness sketched the alleged Bigfoot looked identical to the one my brother had made. To this day, we are still convinced a Bigfoot or something lived out there. My dad named him Sassy, short for Sasquatch. Today's fifth and final terrifying and unexplained cryptid encounter. This happened in Oregon, about 20 to 50 miles east of Sweet Home in the mid-90s. I was a child, about 10 years, when this encounter occurred. I forget about it until I recently had a dream that sparked my memory. I was camping with my family in the mountains outside of Sweet Home. I was doing what all children do when camping and exploring the area, generally following the nearby river, when I came upon a section of river with two steep banks separated by a ravine cut by the river. I vaguely remember looking across to the opposite side of the river and saw a couple of small, pale, emaciated-looking people with pointed ears climbing up the steep embankment on all fours. And I remember wanting to jump across to try to get a better look, but being really creeped out at the same time. It was very surreal. Even now, it's a hazy memory. I don't remember them wearing any kind of clothes, but they may have been wearing some sort of loincloth. I didn't see their faces because I only noticed them as they were moving away from me and facing away from me. No hair or fur whatsoever. Reminds me of the movie with the monsters in The Descent.
All right, folks, what a lineup of just absolute terrifying experiences to either end the night or begin your day. If it's middle of the night wherever you are, then we're ending it. If it's early morning, then we're starting it. I don't know. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Your support is honestly what makes this channel continue to grow and go, and what makes it a safe place for people to share their theory, idea, and experiences. That is all on you, and it is appreciated. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this info with those that you love and care about, and it may just help save your life someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.